Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jude Flynn, and I worked for 35 years in the post office, first as a clerk and then as overseer. I'm president of the Longford Historical Society. I was 25 years secretary, so I got to know the history of the county. Around 1981, I felt that life was changing. Even people that doing their shopping, there was no such thing as supermarkets, and the fairs on the streets were all the go. So I decided to record the social history of County Longford. I taped people in the county, in the UK, in the USA, and I taped one man in Australia. And I published, I have 13 books written. I write a book every year called Fireside Tales of County Longford, and I'm working on my number 14. In 2003, I tipped a man on the Athlone Road here. He was Christy Roach. He was a cattle dealer. He had a lorry at the time, and not many people could afford lorries, but he used to go down to the south to buy cattle. But he told me a very folk memory about about Oliver Goldsmith. I thought it was very interesting. Oliver Goldsmith was dead over 200 years, but still there was a folk memory of him. His grandmother had a small cafe here in town, and his grandmother often told him that her mother told him that Oliver Goldsmith used to pass from Lissoy through Ballyman at 9 o'clock every morning on his way to Edgeworthstown, to school in Edgeworthstown. And at that time, he was riding a nag. And I looked up at the time, the description of a nag was a run-down horse. But Oliver Goldsmith made a comment going through Ballyman. He said that Ballyman is a very sleepy town. And grandmother said to him, I suppose because none of the inns are open, that's why they're sleepy. But last year, a man from Dublin gave me an article about Edgeworthstown. In the pictures they sent me, there was one what's called Goldsmith School. It was a school that Goldsmith, so I definitely published it. And I'm very sorry that the man that bought that demolished it years ago. But it's good to have a record in the picture. One of the best people that I tipped around Ballyman was the P.J. Casey from Ardover. I think Ardover would be about 3 miles from here. P.J. was a great carpenter, and he worked in Mount Murphy's here. Now, I don't know whether that's the top of the town or the bottom, but he worked in Murphy's. They were builders. One day, there was a man with him called Dalton, Tony Dalton. He was from about by four that direction. I showed him something. Showed him a wooden cross that his grandfather had made. And the wooden cross, he told me the story was that this wooden cross was made during the penal days. And the priests going around, because they weren't allowed to say mass, they would say mass or mass rock. And this priest, this carpenter, is able to make the cross, but make anyway that could be broken up, and then reassembled when they come to the mass rock. So this priest on the road, when we go into a bag in his bag, he did this piece of timber in the bottom of the bag. So his red coat held him up. They wouldn't know exactly what his mission was. But he told me another story. Around 1860, there was great immigration from County Longford, Westmeath and Wexford to Argentina. He told me an interesting story about a man from Ballyman, police barracks in Ballyman. They were on the track of a man who was a great runner. They couldn't catch him. This man, who was a local man, he worked in Argentina for about 10 years. And he says to me, if you give me £2, I'll catch him for you. So of course the policeman didn't believe him at first, but they said they'd employ him. And he got this pony and he caught up to him, beyond time he caught up to him, and he had this lasso they used to do in the pumps, and he pinned the man down. That's the way they used to do the cattle in Argentina in the grass. And the man had experience at that, and that way it was a toast to the town of Ballyman that evening. So P.J. Casey was so good. I went out twice on 2 occasions to USA to tape him, and I found it very good. I told you could depend it was true. I also went to a man in Manchester. He worked in Malloy's shop in Longford, during the 1940s to 50. He was Hastings, Sean Hastings. He was a native of Westport in County Mayo. His father had a shop there. But his mother came from County Galway, Lenan, and her name was Joyce. And so he claimed to be a first cousin of the Joyces. And the Joyce dynasty was here at the time, before the 1900. Joyce had a shop in Longford where providers are now. There also a shop in Legan, there's a shop in Edgertown, and a shop in Drumleesh. Because I looked up old lads of the Roscommon hurdle and saw Joyce shop and give them a description of all the goods and sold. So then, one of the most important things I done about 4 years ago, went out to Malibu in California, and I interviewed Monsignor Sheridan. Monsignor Sheridan was a great priest in America. He two other brother priests that were from the Mar, of Culmcale actually, on the fringe of the Mar. But unfortunately, since he died into an accident, and his sister, who was a nun, was secretary to him, and she was killed in an accident. But I was glad that I went out. I only published one short story of his. But that way, I met some interesting characters. Although in Australia, my daughter lived in Melbourne at the time, and I found out there was a dying man from Culmcale Parish, a townland called Gelsha. I was doing a feature about Gelsha, so I interviewed him, and he told me a great story. So about 2 weeks ago, I got word from his wife that he had just died since. So then, this man in Manchester, Hastings was telling about him. I went over to Manchester and I taped him. I taped 4.5 hours of stories. I never used it yet. Because this man used to write, and he'd write on both sides of the page. He'd write on the margin on each side, write with a writing pen, make sure that you read it. And Harry Farrell in the leader office, he used to write to him, and Harry Farrell would often leave the letter aside for a couple of days. He said, I'd be in the mood to read it. So I have about 10 letters from him. I never opened yet, because you knew he was writing. But I've 4.5 hours of tape. In all, I've taped about 600 people now, between Ireland, the UK, and USA. And I find that it's a worthwhile collection to have. Most of the people I've passed on, I include tape Billy Nathan here, people like that, and they have great stories to tell. I also taped Fred Moncrief of Palace, who was an authority on Goldsmith. I published an interview in my books. So I think that's all I have to say, but I find that worthwhile, and it's great for me to have an opportunity here to tell you about it.